Let me see you first. So you are, I mean, a dark. Okay, I see it. So ask me what your Ramadan experience is. And then sure your patience. I'm doing that. Yeah. And we sort of figured out Instagram. So Inshallah, we're gonna try to do this as somewhat of a conversation. So okay, mashallah. You've been fasting Ramadan for a minute. How's it been? Alhamdulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So Ramadan, I was born and raised Muslim. And so I have been fasting some version of Ramadan fast since I was about 5. Right? So I know if other people have had this experience as well, is when you're a little kid, you first start off by, I'm fasting from breakfast until lunch. Yes. Right? You fast from breakfast until lunch, and then you fast from lunch into dinner, and you're like, can I have a snack? No, you cannot have a snack. You're fasting. Right? And so that's how fasting sort of began. You fast between meals. Then I discovered the grown-ups were keeping a secret. Oh. I would be woken up in the middle of the night, and I would hear a party. The grown-ups were having a party while I was sleeping. That was so shiesty. And I would try to stay up to try to catch them in the act having this party. But I could never. My 5-year-old brain could not stay up long enough. So one day I just had to ask my mom, like, why are you having a party? Like, I wake up at like 3:00 in the morning and I smell pancakes and eggs. And how are you like having all of this food while I'm sleeping? And so then she explained to me what suhoor was. And I was like, well, I want to eat halal beef bacon at 3 a.m. I want to wake up for suhoor. But in order to wake up for suhoor, I had a trade-off. If I woke up for suhoor, I had to fast the whole day. Okay. So it wasn't until I was about 7 that I was like, fair trade-off. Okay. I want to go to the party at 3 a.m. So I'm going to fast the whole day. Okay. And so suhoors at my house when I was a little girl, and I continue this tradition with my own kids. Some people wake up and they're just like, have cereal, have that. We have a full breakfast. When my son got married and him and his wife lived with us for the first few months of their marriage, she just would sit around and she's like, you guys have suhoor parties. Yeah. So we would get up and make a full breakfast and we talk and we do, it's as if it was 9 a.m., but it's, 3:00 in the morning. And so that sort of began my fasting. When I was about 7 years old, I started fasting full days. And iftar was just as celebratory. right? But the important thing about iftar at 7 is somewhere between Asa and Maghrib, you would go to the penny candy store. So I'm aging myself a little bit because back then you can actually buy candy for a penny. And you would get now laters. Now I'm on the West Coast, so I don't even know if this is going to relate to you guys. Well, we had now laters.
I had those. Did you?
We had Chico sticks, and we had the little Debbie cakes. And so about 30 minutes before iftar, you would put them all out on your bed, and you would arrange them just so in the order in which you were going to eat them, right? And you would just sort of like keep rearranging them in different orders until it was time for iftar. Right? So you just keep rearranging. No, I think I'm gonna have the Chico stick first. How about I break the Chico stick in half and then have a now later, a Chico stick, then a now later. There was a science to it in my kid book. So I started off fasting. I've always had a really joyous relationship with Ramadan and fasting. It was never something that I dreaded or didn't look forward to. It always started off with a reward and then it ended with a reward. So alhamdulillah, my mother made it such a satisfying experience for me.
Alhamdulillah, that's awesome. Alhamdulillah. So how did you make it so joyous? How do you prepare for Ramadan to make it so joyous every year?
So as I got older, I think that we, of course, besides the physical fasting, began to recognize the spiritual impact of fasting and all of the barakah with it. And then as I grew into my knowledge of health and fitness, to recognize how the physical, mental, and spiritual well-being is no other time more tangibly intertwined than in Ramadan itself. Our physical experience is enhancing our spiritual experience. And so it intertwines those two things together. And when you look at all of the physical benefits of fasting, in addition to the spiritual benefits, you realize that we were built for this. That's my theme today. We were built for this. Absolutely.
Can I ask you to speak up a little more?
Absolutely.
Can everybody in the back hear? I'm done.
Yeah.
How are we built for this?
Okay.
What do you mean by that? That sounds awesome.
We were built for that.
That sounds divinely planned.
It was definitely divinely planned. So the beautiful thing about fasting and fasting in Ramadan in particular is, first, I always like to just remind us as Muslims that 4 out of the 5 pillars are all physical actions. So there's no way for us to separate our physical body from the spirituality that we're looking to attain, right? Fasting, making salah is a physical action. Fasting is a physical action. Giving zakah is a physical action. Making hajj is a physical action. So Allah is literally giving us our body and say, use this tool to worship me. So you can't separate. I think that is where we sometimes don't take into consideration enough, is that Allah is literally giving you the tool and saying, this is the tool that I'm giving you in order for you to attain the iman, in order for you to attain closeness to me, to worship me. And so Ramadan is the time. So you will find that I use a lot of metaphors. If it starts getting too convoluted, just let me know. So one of the things about Ramadan, it's really a time of not only using the tool that Allah gave us, but it's also the time that Allah has given us to sharpen the tool that He has given us. All of the physical benefits that Ramadan provides is just simply unmatched in anything else that we can do.
How so?
So what we know in research, so we know that intermittent fasting is all of the rage. But one of the things that's really interesting about the research around intermittent fasting is that most of the research around the physical benefits of intermittent fasting is actually done on Muslim communities. Because any researcher know that the biggest challenge with research is making sure you have compliance, right? Fasting is very difficult to get compliance from people, like for a whole 30 days. If you study Muslim populations in Ramadan, you are guaranteed compliance because they're not doing it for the research. You're literally observing them in their natural activity. And so a lot of the research where they talk about these are the benefits of fasting, they're actually looking at Muslim communities, and not just looking at Muslim communities in the West, but Muslim communities in Egypt and Morocco and in Malaysia. And they see that there are so many physical benefits. It's really interesting that, so I went to a conference about intermittent fasting. It was specifically, the entire conference was researchers around intermittent fasting. And one researcher, she said, what got her interested in intermittent fasting is because she had Muslim patients. And she said during the month of Ramadan, she would take them off of all of their high blood pressure medication. And and her patients who were diabetic, they did not have to take insulin during the month of Ramadan. But within 30 days of Ramadan ending, they were back on all their medication. And she was like, this is very interesting. And that is what got her interested in being able, wanting to study fasting, is because she saw the benefits of her Muslim patients. So then when they stopped fasting, all of their illnesses came back.
That's so fascinating. How do we stay healthy then? We can't fast forever.
Can't fast forever, but we need to fast more. Right? So I have a saying, says we should eat like the Prophet, eat less like the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and eat less often like the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That is the general gist of what we should be doing when it comes to fasting. So fasting is really fascinating in how it actually affects us on a physiological level. The first thing that happens when we fast is we actually lower our blood glucose and our insulin level. Now, what I do around health and wellness is an insulin-centered approach. So, in my opinion, this is literally the snowball that creates most of the other benefits, right? What your insulin level is doing is going to affect literally every organ and system in your body. So that is one of the major things that fasting does. It literally stops us from eating, allows our blood glucose to lower, does not create insulin rises and falls throughout the day. And when your blood glucose lower and your insulin level lowers, inflammation goes down, BDNF goes up, blood pressure goes down. So each one of these things have actually been studied individually around fasting. So one of the benefits of fasting, the physiological benefits of fasting, is it actually lowers blood pressure. When we fast, and I should talk about timing too. So when in the research, when they look at fast, they look at a 12-hour fast. Actually, can I back up a little bit? So this gets a little technical, right?
We like technical.
Yeah, I'm at Stanford, so you guys got it. So fasting, what Muslims do is called dry fasting, right? So when you read and they talk about intermittent fasting, most of the time they're talking about wet fasting. So wet fasting is what we see common on Al Gore's internet, right? Is you go 12 hours, 14 hours, 16, 18, 24, and the only thing that you can have is coffee, green tea, and water. So it allows you to drink all of those things. And the reason why those things are actually allowed is because they do not create an insulin response. So as long as you're keeping it under 2 cups of coffee, then your insulin will not begin to rise. So when they talk about intermittent fasting, that is what they're talking about. But for Muslims, not even water, right?
Yes, that is the Muslim problem.
So this is called dry fasting.
Interesting.
And so when they do the research on it, they are normally specific. Did we look at dry fasting or did we look at wet fasting? The first fascinating thing that is specifically around Muslims fasting is that dry fasting actually is 3 times more metabolically beneficial than wet fasting. When they look at dry fasting versus wet fasting, all of the things that I'm going to tell you that happens to our body actually happens quicker when we don't drink any water.
I don't know.
So it is, again, Allah literally built our bodies for this. So when we talk about the benefits of fasting, the first thing that fasting does is it lowers blood pressure by activating your parasympathetic nervous system. So oftentimes people with high blood pressure will find lots of benefits around fasting. Now, I'll tell you of an extreme case. I don't recommend this. I just thought it was fascinating, right? So you know who Will Smith is, right?
Mm-hmm.
The actor Will Smith. So he did a red table talk with his family, and he said that he suffered for high blood pressure for many years.
Mm-hmm.
He did a 10-day fast, and at the end of the 10 days, his blood pressure was gone, and he's never taken high blood pressure medicine since.
Kind of luck.
Very, very interesting. I have clients, and again, this is something I'm not recommending because you should do it with coaching or and it depends on your health situation, that we've done 3-day fasts, 3-day water fast. And at the end of the 3 days, their bursitis disappeared. No more bursitis, right? At the end of 3 days, one person, she was like, the arthritis in my knee is gone. It literally heals the body.
How?
Very, very, that is very fascinating.
I don't know if you were getting this.
Yes. So there's a couple of things. So when we talk about extended fast, and I do want to come back to fasting in Ramadan, but when we talk about extended fast, they've done research studies on 3-day fasts.
Mm-hmm.
And what the research study showed is that when they first looked at a 3-day fast, they thought, oh, okay, we don't see anything in the blood that's different than if you had, just decreased the amount of calories. And so what the researchers did is they looked inside of the bone marrow, and what they found is that white blood cells, and the researchers' literal words were, they retreated inside of the bone marrow and became supercells. And so once they came out of the bone marrow, they introduced a virus into the body. It attacked it in a way that it would not attack it in any other way, and immediately got rid of the virus. They find that after a 3-day fast, your entire immune system regenerates itself with a 3-day. And this is a water fast, right? So I'm not saying do a 3-day Islamic fast and don't eat sahur or whatever, right? So
Not so.
yeah, not good, not good. You should have water for sahur, water for iftar. That'll get you through your 3 days. But it literally regenerates the entire immune system. So that is the reason why people are finding, like, for certain ailments in their body, within 3 days, it can completely heal those things.
Yeah, I noticed that in myself. Like the first day, I'm like on a spiritual high. I'm like, wee, it's Ramadan. And then the second day, I'm like, oh, this is hard. Third day, this is hard. Fourth day, I'm fine. I'm just fine.
Let me tell you why that happens.
Yes, please.
So one of the reasons why people will struggle for the first couple of days is because your primary metabolism is functioning on carbohydrates. For most people function mainly on carbohydrates. And what fasting does is, and I always tease my anti-keto people, and I tell them that ketosis is so beneficial that Allah made it a part of our DNA.
That's a flex. That's a solid flex.
I'm just saying. So when you fast, you are forcing your body to actually switch from burning carbohydrates to burning fat. And most people don't go long enough on a regular basis to ever switch into that system. And so when that switch happens during that second, third, fourth day of Ramadan, it actually is basically a jolt to your system. Your body is now adjusting. You may feel very fatigued. Some people will literally start having headaches what's actually happening is your body is saying, oh, I don't have carbohydrates in order to burn, and now I have to burn fat. But it's a completely different system. It's sort of like the difference between driving a regular car and a Tesla. And I hate to say it, but fasting and going into ketosis is like switching into a Tesla.
Where the Tesla's good or the
Where the Tesla is good, that's not made by Elon Musk.
I mean
So, um, so that shift is where people actually struggle shifting over, because ideally we should have something that's called metabolic flexibility. But honestly, most people don't have metabolic flexibility because they don't fast Mondays and Thursdays. And Ramadan is the only time they fast throughout the year. And we've been convinced that we have to have 3 meals and 2 snacks every single day. And we get sad in the evening and we're eating an hour before we go to bed. And so our body never goes more than the 7 hours that we're sleeping when it's not eating. Right. And so we never get, and in order for your body to make that switch, you have to go at least 12 hours with no food. And most people never do that except for in Ramadan.
So is fasting better in the summer?
Not better, but the longer fast actually gives you more metabolic benefits. So there's a minimum in which your fast will begin to give you metabolic benefits, and that minimum is a 12-hour. So the reason why it's 12 hours is because when you the metabolic benefits doesn't happen until your liver runs out of glycogen. So you are burning carbohydrates or glucose throughout your entire day, hour 10. By hour 12, depending on how metabolic flexible, some people will dip into liver reserves in hour 10. But by hour 12, most people have run through their entire blood glucose energy supply and their liver glycogen supply. Once your liver glycogen supply is gone, now your body is like, oh, I have no more glucose or glycogen. So now I'm going to convert stored fat into energy. And so winter fast versus summer fast is, if you're fasting in the summer, you're just fasting for a longer period of time. And so when you turn over from glycogen into ketones, your fat is what your body converts into ketone, both consumed fat and excess body fat. Once that is converted over, then that is when you start getting even more benefits to fasting.
It is really fast. Sorry, my brain's like, wow. I need to. I had a list of questions. How does that impact your How does that impact you psychologically? Like, how does it impact your mood? How does it impact your spirit?
Absolutely. This is why I say, like, the fasting literally is like Allah literally built us for this, and He built the fasting in a way that gives us everything that we need to get the maximum spiritual benefits from Ramadan. Right? Ramadan is the month of the Quran. When we fast, it increases BDNF in our brain, which is what we need to improve our memory. So if you are on the Quran journey, Ramadan is actually the best time for you to start learning new surahs, for you to give your practice in. And the fact that it is the month of the Quran, Allah literally built into our body to memorize the Quran during this month, and built into our practice. So it's very, very beneficial for that. The other thing that is beneficial for your mood, there's actually been studies on fasting and depression, and it improves mood, improves people's depressive states. So
what's with the Muslims that are grouchy? Because they're hungry.
Because they're hungry. Because they haven't switched over to ketones yet.
Is it just, I need to wait them out?
Yes, you need to wait them out.
Do I need to wait myself out when I'm grouchy?
So the grouchiness is a part of that switching your metabolic system from glycogen into ketone. Okay, so now you're like, So the interesting thing about that is, like, so the grouchiness, because as you notice that even people who are like that, by the end of Ramadan, it's a lot better, right? Yeah. Because now your body is used to becoming more metabolically flexible. It's not like fighting against you. And so you sort of, one, wait it out. Number two, if you want to improve that, how you break your fast is going to be really important. Okay. So how do we maintain these results is improving our eating habits along with the fasting is how you actually maximize the results, right? So breaking your fast with sugar, processed foods, lots of carbohydrates, all of those things, you're literally just reversing all of those benefits, and then it has to start all over the next day. And then you're reversing them and it has to start over. So you're going through that throughout the entire month. Alhamdulillah, you were still getting the benefits. So they did one research study where they looked at so the interesting about many of the studies that they do around fasting for Muslims in Ramadan, they're observational studies. They're not telling them to change their food or change anything. So despite the fact that they aren't changing anything about the way that they're eating, you're still getting physiological benefits, right? They see that LDL goes down during Ramadan, despite the fact that they're not changing the way that they're eating. They see that insulin resistance improves during Ramadan, despite eating all of the stuff that we know that we eat during Ramadan and all of the extra food that we eat, right? We see that blood pressure goes down despite all of that. So when you eat is super important. There's a really good book by Sachin Panda called The Circadian Code. And Sachin Panda was a part of the research team that received a Nobel Peace Prize for discovering that every cell in our body has a circadian rhythm. And so it's a great book. I suggest it to people all the time. It's really a great book.
Can someone find it and share it in the group? What is it called?
The Circadian Code.
The Circadian
by
Code.
Sachin Panda. So in this book that they did this study on mice, and what they did was they took one group of mice and they made them grazers. So they gave them the standard American diet. So in research terms, what that means is standard American diet, as we know, is considered a very unhealthy diet. But what makes it a standard American diet? That it is high in both fat and carbohydrates. So those are the two things, the two macronutrients that makes it unhealthy. So they took the same amount of food and they gave it to mice inside of their cage and allowed them to graze 24 hours a day. They took another set of mice, gave them the exact same diet, but they only let them eat for 12 hours a day, and then they took it away at the end of the 12 hours. It was the exact same diet. The mice who only ate for 12 hours a day and fasted for 12 hours a day, the mice who were overweight lost weight. The mice who had high cholesterol, the cholesterol improved. Mice who had insulin resistance, their insulin resistance. Every mice with heart disease, they had improved it. And every mice that had a disease that was similar to human diseases all improved, not in the change of diet, but in the time span in which they ate.
Fascinating. SubhanAllah. So I have two questions, because one, you mentioned starting habits, whether it's eating healthier or memorizing Quran. Like, how do you do that? Do you start before Ramadan? Do you start day one Ramadan? Like, how do you do that? And I'll remember the second question.
So if your goal is to improve any of those health markers, you should definitely start before Ramadan. So that's number one. If you are a person that do have issues with grumpiness or fatigue, if you normally eat a lot of sugar, if you normally drink a whole lot of coffee and you can't start your day without coffee, you should definitely start to break that before Ramadan. If you're like a type of person like, don't talk to me until I get my coffee, and you should definitely break that before Ramadan.
I feel like everyone looks at me and I don't appreciate it.
You gotta break that, because what's going to happen is, I always tell people, like, you should prepare your physical body for the ibadah of exercise. Ramadan and fasting is the ibadah of exercise, or the exercise of ibadah, right? You should prepare your body for the exercise of ibadah. If you were going to go and run a 5K, you need to do a warm-up, right? We don't even make salah without making wudu, right? But we eat McDonald's on Monday and then we fast on Tuesday, no prep, no nothing, right? As if like, oh yeah, I'm doing it for Allah, so he's going to sustain me. Yeah, you'll probably be alive at the end, but you don't have to suffer through it, right? The purpose of Ramadan is to build taqwa. The purpose of Ramadan is not to suffer.
I mean,
so the suffering, the fatigue, the headaches, I'm doing it for Allah's sake, right? Allah is not meant for us to suffer. So we have to prepare our body for the exercise of ibadah. So Your nutrition preparation definitely should start before Ramadan, because here's the benefit of that. Those days that you're feeling really bad, you're probably going to be too tired, too grumpy, too fatigued to do Tarawih, to read Quran, to do dhikr. So like you're missing 2-3 days of what you could maximize your ibadah because you didn't prepare beforehand, right? So even if you are going to do Tarawih, if you're making yourself go do it, I'm sure your khushu is not the greatest because you're like, I'm hungry, I'm tired, I really, the whole time you're thinking like, what time is the imam gonna be finished reciting, because I just need to get at least 2 hours before suhoor, and you're like planning your entire night while you're making your Tarawih, right? Guilty, I know this because I've been there, right? So it's really important that you start preparing your nutrition before Ramadan. Like start decreasing the amount of coffee that you're having, decreasing the amount of added sugar, decreasing your overall carbohydrates. Most people eat too many carbohydrates altogether, right? So if you think about it, and so I give people this test, right? So this is, even if you're not interested in doing low carb or keto or anything like that, you probably still eat too many carbohydrates, right? A serving of rice is a half a cup. I challenge people that when you go make your plate at home, the next time that you're going to have rice, take a half a cup, and so make your plate the way you normally make it. And then scoop a half a cup and put it next to the amount of rice that you put on your plate that you normally eat. I guarantee 9 out of 10 people are probably eating 2 to 3 times that amount in the rice that they're eating. When you look at what a serving size should actually be, and then look at what you're putting on your plate, you will find a very big difference. So when people say, oh, well, I do want to eat bread, I do want to eat rice, even if you're not cutting it out, diabetes is literally you eating too much carbohydrates for too long. Literally, that's the baseline of it. Chronic diabetes is caused by chronically high insulin level. That literally means you kept spiking your insulin level so much that your body is now resistant to trying to control it. So we have, and it's an epidemic, right? Not only is it an epidemic in Western countries, 7 out of the top 10 countries in the world with the highest population of diabetes are Muslim majority countries. The top of that list is India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. So those are real, it's a real problem in the Muslim world. And diabetes, my mother, rahimahullah, she suffered from uncontrolled diabetes for over 25 years. And it was what, at the end of her life, caused her to have a foot amputated, a severe stroke that paralyzed her for the last 18 months of her life, and eventually dementia. So I take it very seriously. And it's something that we really have to like be very, very conscious about and understand. And what I realized with my own mother is that most people really don't understand how to manage or even reverse diabetes, because it is reversible. And because they don't, they sort of get on this, well, everything makes my sugar go up. So my mother used to say this all the time, and many people that I know with diabetes say this all the time. Everything makes my sugars go up, so just give it to me, right? Because they don't understand what actually makes your sugar go up. And that's another problem, is that we refer to it as sugar, and then people think that it's actual sugar that makes it goes up when it's actually carbohydrates that make it go up. So she would do things like give me the cake and just take the icing off, right? Thinking that she was doing better. Right? But the truth is even though we call it the sugar, right? In the Black community, we do anyway, right?
In Egypt, it's so good.
Yeah.
Also just sugar.
We call it a sugar. It makes people think that bread is not going to affect it, rice is not going to affect it, pasta is not going to. All those things turn into sugar in your blood. So it is the sugar, but it's blood glucose, the blood sugar, and carbohydrates is what causes that. And what fasting does is that it actually allows us to rest our blood glucose and insulin level. So here's the metaphor that I use for fasting. I don't know. Do y'all want the glass ceiling metaphor or the party metaphor? All right. So I'll give you the glass ceiling metaphor first. So if you think of sort of like your body has a glass ceiling, right? And everything under that glass ceiling is, and think of every time that you have any type of carbohydrates that raises your blood glucose. So your glass ceiling is at 140. Your goal in eating is not to not eat, but to eat foods that do not hit the glass ceiling. Okay. So if you're eating, for example, a steak and some vegetable, your blood glucose, think of the blood glucose, let's think of it as sort of like a big wave. The wave is only going to come up a slight amount because protein and fat actually only brings your blood glucose minimally up. It does not give you a spike. It's going to bring up a little bit. Then you decide, I'm going to actually have some mashed potatoes with, right? And mashed potatoes bring your blood glucose up to 150. What's going to happen is that wave is going to hit the glass ceiling and it's going to crack it, right? So think about, and then for snack, I'm going to have me some chips. It's going to hit the glass ceiling, it's going to crack. Now, every time you make your blood glucose go above 140, it's cracking the ceiling. Now, we have great, our body has construction workers that can fix the glass ceiling, but it cannot fix the glass ceiling if a wave is going to keep hitting it. So it's just sitting back waiting for you to stop eating so they can go fix the ceiling. It's like, we can't, fix the ceiling if they're going to constantly be rumbling it because they're keep eating. When you're fasting, you actually, the workers are like, we got 12 hours to. So we're going in and we're fixing the insulin, we're fixing the high blood pressure, we're fixing the inflammation that's causing the arthritis. They're doing all of those things to the glass ceiling. Okay, now you did your iftar. Now you got a choice. Are you going to go break that ceiling again and give the workers more work? Or are you going to keep it low, try to mitigate your blood glucose so the ceiling isn't cracking? When you are actually diagnosed with diabetes, I always tell, diabetes means that now glass pieces are falling from the ceiling. So you've been pre-diabetes, and that's pretty cracked. Insulin resistant, you got a few cracks on there. But once you start having big chunks fall from the ceiling, now that is diabetes.
So I saw 2 hands up.
Yes.
I think I saw Azad the first one, but go ahead.
I apologize if you've already mentioned this, but have there been studies comparing the benefits of fasting to the benefits of the keto diet?
So they are not juxtaposed to one another. So the interesting thing about the keto diet is the keto diet was actually created to simulate fasting in the body. So the ketogenic diet began as an experiment there was a husband and wife team in France who treated prescription resistant children who had epilepsy. So this is before we had all of the great epileptic medicine that we have today. And these children were resistant to what was available at the time. And so what they did was they put these children on 30-day water fasts. And when they actually, it's really interesting because they actually came to the United States and they presented their research in the United States. And what they showed was that by putting children on a 30-day water fast, it literally cured 80% of the participants. It cured, not just stopped, but cured their epilepsy. And these were children who were prescription resistant to anything that was helping. So 2 doctors at the Mayo Clinic, they decided that what is it about fasting, doing a water fast, what does it do to the brain that literally heals the brain? And what they discovered was that it was the production of ketones that actually healed these children's brains. So they said, how can we simulate creating ketones in the body without requiring people to give up food? Because as you can imagine, it's probably very difficult to have a 10-year-old go 30 days without eating, right?
Yes.
And so that is actually how the ketogenic diet was developed. They knew that if you did not consume carbohydrates, that your body's energy system will switch to ketones, and the ketones is what actually healed the brain. So initially, the ketogenic diet was initially developed to simulate a 30-day water fast in the body to heal the brain. Now, since then, we have found it to be beneficial in a variety of ways at a variety of levels. So initially, when we talk about a ketogenic diet is about percentages, not sort of like the standard. Everybody's like, oh, if I have 50 net grams of carbs, then I'm in ketosis. It really doesn't work like that. Okay. It's about the percentage. So medical ketosis is when your carbohydrate level is less than 5% of your total calories. Research then began to develop what happens with 10%, what happens with 15%, right? So people get into ketosis, and each level is different. So there's medical ketosis, like if you're actually, so for example, there's research around cancer and a ketogenic diet, literally shrinking tumors and reversing the cancer. There is research around the ketogenic diet beneficial for multiple sclerosis, for Parkinson's. So many of the conditions that affect the brain has been shown to be very responsive to a ketogenic diet. And it varies between medicinal ketosis and what we call nutritional ketosis. So nutritional ketosis is not as low as 5%. Most people can achieve nutritional ketosis between 10 and 15% of their total daily carbohydrates. So the ketogenic diet, so not that I know of research that look like, oh, this is what happens when you fast versus when you're on a ketogenic diet. A ketogenic diet is literally used instead of fasting. It creates the same condition in the body.
So I saw a couple more hands go up, but before we start getting to questions, because I wanted to make sure that we covered it from a spiritual perspective. There's so many hadith of like the Prophet ﷺ saying that the worst thing that a human can fill is their stomach, like is the worst vessel you can fill. There's the actually a moment where he I don't think it was a hadith. I think it was one of the Sahaba that he said we don't need doctors like other people, because we're a people that we don't eat until we are hungry, and when we eat, we don't eat till we're full. Subhanallah. So there's actually
that part.
And I want to, because we like subhanallah, like it is incredible that our bodies are built to do this, and I know we're like I have a bunch of science questions, so I want to make sure before we get to a bunch of science questions that we are doing it with the intention of actually following a sunnah.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's obvious spiritual benefits to that, but two, because it is Ramadan and you're doing it for 30 days, like how do you design that experience so that you're maximizing it?
Yes. I think so. Focus on the nutrition aspect. I think we sort of, Ramadan becomes a cooking contest and an eating contest, right? And this is really something that we need to change culturally in all of our cultures, right? And just as a Muslim community, because the nutrition aspect of what you're eating is what is going to affect your spiritual experience in Ramadan. Our goal in Ramadan is to have energy and to have focus while we are fasting and despite fasting, right? So if you are eating, if you're saying, I'm not having dessert tonight, you turn that into ibadah, because I know that dessert is going to make me tired and prevent me from standing from the whole Tarawih. I know that if I don't have that dessert, I can actually I can get up and make tahajjud, right? So the energy that you're getting from your food is, we have to look at food as a way of fueling our body. So again, one of my metaphors, if you think of your body as the car that Allah gave you to get to the destination of Him, your food is the fuel that's going inside of the car. Right? Is that fuel going to get you there quickly, or is that fuel going to get you there slowly? Right? Yeah, you'll probably get there if you ate anything that you wanted, right? But there are ways in which you can eat in which you're not going to suffer. So I want to give some really specifics around this. Suhoor, definitely very, very important for you to have suhoor, as is the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But specifically eating protein in the morning. This is what, like, it's literally a game changing. Then I'm going to tell you about a little modern day cheat hack for suhoor, right? You do not start your day off with pancakes or oatmeal or I'm going to have some toast and some tea. That is a recipe for disaster. You even if you eat carbohydrates, a carbohydrates energy lifeline in your body is 4 hours max. So everything is different. Like grapes will give you a different amount of time of energy. Bread will give you a different amount of time. Vegetables will give you a different amount of time. But max 4 hours if you're eating like barley with the husk on it, right? So if you're eating sahur at 4 a.m., your energy at 10 a.m. is not from that 4 a.m. sahur because that energy is already gone. Now your body's just like storing it. That's not what you're functioning off of. Protein, on the other hand, is going to not only prevent your blood glucose from spiking up, which the other things are going to spike your blood glucose, it's going to keep you even in your energy, and it lasts much longer. So by having protein in the morning, not only is it going to prevent your insulin from spiking and dropping and you being super tired by 11 a.m., but it's also going to help you maintain your muscle. For anybody who, if that's a concern, is going to maintain your muscle throughout the day, right? Your body needs protein for muscle. It is going to keep you full longer. Out of carbohydrates, fats, and protein, protein keeps you full the longest. So I'm going to give you my special cheat hack, right? There is a protein. It comes in a powder form. It is called casein protein. It is made from dairy. So everybody's normally familiar with whey protein. If you go inside of the store, for anybody that lifts weights, this is absolutely, you need to go out this weekend and go get yourself something to get ready for Ramadan. You are going to go and look at in the protein powder section, and you are going to look for casein protein. It is the sister to whey protein. The difference between casein and whey protein, now this is a really cheap hack, is casein protein is slow release. So it actually drips your amino acid over about 10 to 12 hours. So the whole time you're fasting, your muscles are still getting amino acids. It will keep you full much longer throughout your day. It will maintain your energy much longer throughout your day. Casein protein is the modern day hack. Right? So you want to get yourself some casein protein. Even if you have carbohydrates, so I don't expect or recommend anybody to drastically change their diet in Ramadan. Do not use Ramadan as the time that you decide that you're going to do some detox. I've never done keto before, but I'm going to do keto. I'm going to start. You are going to sabotage your fast. You don't want to do anything that is going to shock your body and risk you feeling horrible for a week. We only got 30 days max to maximize this Ibadah, right? I call this is the Dua Olympics, right? You got 30 days to maximize everything. We want to minimize and eliminate any days that we are feeling fatigue, sick, headache, all that other stuff. So you want to make sure that you are having protein in the morning. You want to skip the sugar, no syrup, no honey, no all that other stuff in the morning time. Have yourself protein and some fruit, protein and some vegetables. If you don't have, you can do, they have now high protein yogurts. You can do casein protein. You can do eggs or meat. And think of like, you don't even have to have like a traditional American breakfast. You know, eggs now apparently are killing us. So like skip the eggs, have some chicken or have some beef, right? So you want to make sure that you're having protein in the morning. And when you break your fast, really try as much as you possibly can. Again, I don't even recommend that people sort of like, oh, I'm going to cut out all carbohydrates, and you've never done that before. Like, don't do that. Your body is going to have an adjustment period, and it may not be pleasant. And we don't want to do that in Ramadan. You want to make sure that you are also having protein and vegetables. Focus on protein and vegetables for your evening meal. Even if you have carbohydrates, don't make it the center of your meal. Build everything around your protein. That's really, really important. And that's what's going to not only sustain your energy and make sure that you're not fatigued, but all of those health benefits that are happening while we're fasting is going to extend those health benefits.
Do you have any like really solid practical advice before we go to the questions of like if we remember nothing, eat the protein for sahur, eat the sahur, eat the iftar, eat protein,
and water.
And water.
Protein and water. Those are my two. You will not fail with those two. Protein and water. So we can take questions that would people can leave with something that they can actually.
I think I saw an order. So I saw Bara, Ahmed, Sophia, Howie, Barmaz, and then Owen and Tuba. I don't know who went first. I'm so sorry.
I think he was next though.
Okay.
I mean, because he.
But I was impatient.
I heard, so I said hand very early.
You said something resistant, like
resistance training.
Oh, like
insulin resistant.
Insulin resistant.
The with the kids who did the and it healed and it like cured 80% of them.
They were prescription resistant. That means the doctor gave them medicine and the medicine didn't do anything. They were still having seizures even though they were getting medicine. Yeah.
But
that we're supposed to limit our sweets and like the sugars that we have, but it's our sunnah to break our fast with dates.
I knew this was coming.
The Prophet sometimes even only had dates to break his fast, so it's like the norm for Muslims to have dates during iftar, even at suhoor. How do you?
I knew this was coming. This comes all the time. I have this on. Okay. All right. So here is my position on dates. Yes, dates is the sunnah. So is water. So that's the first thing I'm going to say. Dates is the sunnah. So is water. What you have in terms of dates is relative to your health condition. So one stance that I have is that if you have insulin resistance, there are signs of insulin resistance, there's being diagnosed actually as pre-diabetic, diabetic, PCOS is actually type 4 insulin resistant, dementia is type 3 insulin resistant. Like if you have any form of insulin resistance, then dates is not the best sunnah for you. That's the first thing, right? It's sort of like I tell people it's like Allah mentions the benefits of milk, right? Even in the hadith, the benefits of milk. But we wouldn't tell somebody lactose intolerance, go drink milk every day because the Prophet ﷺ was telling them drink milk. Every sunnah is not for everybody. If you don't have insulin resistance, then, alhamdulillah, have a date. All right? So the Prophet ﷺ, he ate dates, but also many days, that is all he ate. He did not have dates followed by pasta and bread and baklava and then with some chai that's made with 3 cups of sugar, right? The Prophet didn't eat that. So we tend to pick and choose the sunnahs that taste good to us, right? So what I would say for dates, so that's my first part. The second part that I would say is, and this is going to be a difficult one, stay away from majul dates. Majul dates are literally the biggest, sweetest, sugar-filled dates there are. The date that the Prophet ﷺ that he recommended was ajwa dates. Ajwa dates are literally like this big. I came from Umrah in December, brought back ajwa dates. They are literally like this big. They are less sweet. They have more fiber. You're eating the date for the sunnah, not for your meal. So those are two things that it depends on your health condition. If you are going to eat dates because you are not overweight, obesity is also a type of insulin resistance. If you're not overweight, you exercise on a regular basis, because here's the beautiful thing about exercise is muscle is literally a sponge for blood glucose. The people with the most muscle will have the least amount of insulin resistance. Our body literally stores glycogen in our muscle. So if you are not doing if you're not doing resistance training, you absolutely positively need to figure out how to fit that into your life, because it is a storage for your blood glucose. So if you are not overweight, you do resistance training, and you have no existing health condition, tafadla, have your date. If you're not, and all three of those things are together, then bismillah for some water.
So can we go right and then left so that because I'm sorry whoever missed who, and also do you know who put their hand up first?
I was right at the end, so definitely everyone.
So okay, but Sophia had her hand. Is it? Sorry, go ahead and then.
So you mentioned the effects on memory. Is there any times of the day where that is maximized? When it's better to memorize?
Where your memory is maximized during the fast. So the BDNF actually builds up throughout the day. So towards the end of your fast is when you're going to have the greatest amount, right? And then it builds up throughout the month. So those consecutive days of fast actually increases the BDNF in your brain. So that it's a build up effect. The longer we fast, and that's the other beautiful thing about the way Ramadan is designed, the consecutive days actually just maximizes and stacks the health benefits.
Ask the date question, but while I have you, I'm curious to know your thoughts on sleep, because obviously, like the Prophet said, he wouldn't sleep that much, but I feel like all you hear in the health space, it's like, get your 8 hours and stuff.
So here's the interesting thing. So one, I'm an advocate for sleep. Sleep is a health habit, and sleep really is the one thing that can improve multiple health markers that's the easiest things for people to do. But here's the curiosity, and I'm still looking into more and diving into this more myself, is the interesting thing about the recommendation of sleeping 8 consecutive hours is something that human beings only started to do when we developed electricity.
We do what?
Electricity. Right? So if you look at even the writings of people like Shakespeare, he refers to the first sleep and the second sleep. Before we had electricity, people did not sleep for 8 hours a night. They would sleep for about 3-4 hours. They would get up, they would read or do something, and then they would go back to sleep, and then they would wake up. So the human body, and I think about this in such a fascinating way, and I was like, subhanAllah, Allah literally designed us to be able to get up for tahajjud, right? So it really is about how we going to bed on time. Obviously, you're not going to do that if you're not going to bed till 1 o'clock in the morning, and you got to get up at Fajr at 5, right? So got to get yourself in bed earlier. So, because remember, think about it in context. We didn't have electricity back then, which means you went to bed about an hour after the sun went down, right? And so you went to bed much earlier. It wasn't like you were staying up until 2 o'clock in the morning. So that is one of the things that I think that is helpful. The other thing about fasting in particular is its benefit. One of its benefit is actually when your body switches to ketones, you actually need less sleep. This is something that people who follow a ketogenic diet actually experience, is that when you're following a keto diet, when you're deep into ketosis, they can normally, like, after 5 hours, you're up and you're like, let's get it. Right? So this is, again, one of the barakas of fasting.
I wanted to add, because for whenever science catches up, the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ is that he hated people falling asleep before Isha and hated people having conversations after Isha. So the recommendation from the sunnah is to pray Isha and go to sleep. So that your first sleep is actually right after Isha. Also, Bayana had her hand up before anyone else, so I apologize for missing you. So Bayana's next.
Yeah. Like, if you're fasting and you brush your teeth, does that make you fasting?
That's a good question. Brush your teeth with water. So actually the biggest part of brushing your teeth is the mechanical movement. Using suwak, the Prophet ﷺ used to actually clean his teeth with suwak even when he was fasting. So the thing about a lot of the toothpaste is they actually have stuff in the toothpaste that is designed to stay in your mouth and things like this. So it does make your breath smell better, and you should probably not use it while you're fasting. Sorry. Did that. I think we were supposed to go over to someone on the side. Yes. Go ahead. I don't know who had their hand up first.
So, My question was around the water fast that you mentioned, like the 3 days water fast. What is the frequency that you think is best? Is it something that's once a month, once every 6 months? And then just curious about the sleep twice timing. Is it still recommended to get 8 hours across 2 sleeps, or it would be less than that?
You can get as much benefit in 8 hours across 2 sleeps,
Okay.
right? Is it recommended? Recommended by who? Right? Non-Muslims are gonna say no, get 8 consecutive hours.
Yeah.
I think that if you can get that benefit, I don't think that there is. So there's a couple. I'll give you some. Okay, let me. Can you go back to the first fasting question? You said how often to do the 3-day water fast,
Yes.
correct? So when it comes to your 3-day water fast, the first thing that I tell people is you don't want to be a person who like never fasts and then do a 3-day water fast because it can be strenuous. If you're already used to fasting, you fast often, then your 3-day water fast once a season is normally what's recommended if you're not trying to remedy any health issue for general health. So you're thinking like, so for example, I'll often do it at the change of season, right? When summer first comes in, and when winter first comes in, and just do it once a season. Alhamdulillah, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam already have us fasting the 3 white days, right? So we do those 3 white. So technically, so this is another hack. This is sort of like the way I combine science and the sunnah, right? So I have this thing. This is the science of the sunnah. If you did a 3-day, your 3 white days, and did a ketogenic diet during those 3 white days, it would be the equivalent of you doing a complete 3-day water fast. Because what makes fasting work is not the restriction of food. What makes fasting work is the restriction of your insulin. So when they say this breaks your fast, when they're talking about intermittent fasting, the only thing that breaks your fast is any food that causes your insulin level to rise. So that's the reason why you can have coffee. It does not cause your insulin level to rise. You can have the famous butter coffee, right? You're putting fat inside of your coffee. It does not cause your insulin level to rise. Green tea does not cause your insulin level to rise. Water does not cause your insulin level to rise. If you're going to eat rice, it's going to cause your insulin level to rise, so you cannot eat that. So technically, if you wanted to combine the two, you would actually do your 3-day your 3 white days fast, and you would break your fast and just stay keto. Like no carbs, just have a steak and some vegetables, have some chicken and some salad, right? And you would do that for 3 days. So that's a way for you to combine it if you wanted to do it every month. But for general health, then 4 times a year, the change in the season. What was the other question?
The sleep.
Like, is it like
Okay, I
6
answered
and
that.
2, maybe 4
Okay,
and 2?
I answered that. So this is something, if you want to do a little bit more research on it, it is something that's called sleep debt, right? So it is sort of combining for us when it comes to sort of like figuring out like how do we do this and do it in a way where we combine science and the sunnah. Like we want to look at sleep debt, DEBT, research. Like when you don't get 8 hours a day, when is it recommended that you make up that extra hour, right? And so you can do that, and you can make up sleep debt. That's number one. The second thing that I recommend, just as like a personal thing for getting up for tahajjud, have night lights in your house. So what, again, going back to the book that I recommended earlier, The Circadian Code by Sachin Panda, there are 2 things that initiate every metabolic and cellular process in your body every day. That is your first exposure to light and the first thing that you put in your mouth. Food and light. That literally begins a chain reaction with everything that happens in your body. So if you are going to get up for tahajjud and you're like, I'm getting up for tahajjud, but you also need sufficient sleep, have night lights in your house so that you aren't exposing yourself and you're not waking your entire body up, and and it makes it more difficult to get back to sleep. Have a night light in your bathroom. Go make your wudu with your night light. So it's give you minimum amount of light, just enough for you to see. Go make your tahajjud in, I mean, you can do it in a dark room technically. I don't like praying in a dark room personally. I don't know why. It's just weird. But I have a night light inside of our prayer room, right? And so you pray just with minimal light, and then it makes it easier for you to go back to sleep afterwards.
Oh, yes, next.
So I remember you mentioned yesterday that you're a powerlifter.
Yes.
And so I was really curious about like how your routine sort of changes during Ramadan, if at all. And also, um, how you like maintain your strength, any changes that you see to it, and if you can even like build strength during Ramadan as well.
Yes. Okay. So last question first. No, you should not use Ramadan to build strength. so, so alhamdulillah. So I am also a competitive powerlifter. Alhamdulillah. And I hold the state record for my age for the state of alhamdulillah, for the state of Connecticut. So what that means is my max bench press is 180, max deadlift is 370, and my max squat is 340 pounds. What is that? Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. So if you are building muscle, Ramadan is not the time to build muscle. Ramadan, I actually don't do powerlifting workouts. I switch my workouts to be lighter weight. And the goal in Ramadan is to maintain your muscle and not lose it. And the way that you're going to do that is making sure you're eating sufficient protein. I know I sound like a broken record because I keep saying protein, 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 but it really is that essential. Your muscles literally is just a collection of amino acids. So it will not build off of carbohydrates. It will not build. It's not about energy. It's not about whether or not you have enough energy. So there's two things about building muscle or about maintaining muscle in Ramadan. Number one, you want to make sure that you are eating sufficient protein. So that means that my Ramadan plan for nutrition is I'm making sure that I'm going to have sufficient protein, at least about 40 grams of protein in the morning time. I'm going to have protein centered meal for 40 to 50 grams of protein for iftar. And then probably in between my break and tarawih, I'll have a protein shake to make sure I'm getting the rest of that protein in. So making sure that I'm eating enough protein. When it comes to exercise, there's two things that you have to be concerned about in resistance training in Ramadan. Number one, never, ever, ever, ever do your resistance training in the daytime. Never. That's my hard rule. If you want to maintain or build muscle, you absolutely must be able to eat within an hour of your workout. So you want to do, if you have energy, to do it right before iftar, or you want to do it after you break your fast, because you have to. If you work out, and again, this is not about whether or not, because when you're young, you could do this. I remember doing this when I was young, right? When I was young, it's like 10 a.m. I could go out and run 5 miles, come back home, I can do everything, right? It's not about whether or not you have the energy to do it. You can have the energy, but what's happening in your body is you've just worked out and your body is like, I need amino acids to build all of the muscle fibers that was broken down during this workout. So it's leg day. Your legs are going to go take amino acids from the muscles in your arm. And then it's arm day. Your arms are going to go take amino acids from the muscles in your legs. And so by the end of Ramadan, you've actually lost muscle because your body literally cannibalizes itself in order for it to repair itself. So in order to prevent that, within an hour of your workout, you want to take in amino acids, which is protein. You want to have protein. So for Ramadan, the goal is for you to maintain yourself, not to get stronger, because it's going to be almost impossible for you to build muscle during Ramadan.
So, quick public service announcement. If you left anything in the sanctuary, the Catholic community has an event that's starting at 8:30. Please go grab it now. I'm done. Thank you. I think I know I'm trying to go in order. I'm so sorry. I think Adi was next.
I feel like other people were before you, so.
Okay,
She's
but
had her
then
hand up for a
Pupa
minute.
was next. Oh,
She had her hand up for a
go
minute.
ahead.
No, not necessarily. No, it's not. So when you say healthy, so number one, healthy is like a really broad term. Healthy for who? So it is better for you to eat suhoor because Most people do not eat sufficient protein. Again, I know I'm parent during Ramadan, and if you are skipping suhoor, you're just sort of making more work for yourself later on in the day. And so you should really try to get up and have suhoor, even if you're just like, you can have a, now yogurt has 20 grams of protein in it. Have a protein yogurt and some berries, have a casein protein shake, have something that is going to give you some sustained energy. So I am not an advocate of skipping suhoor or having measly suhoors.
At least drink water to follow the sunnah.
Absolutely.
I think that is a keyword. No? Okay, Ahmed. I think Ahmed, and then I see the hand. Oh no, wait. Did you go? Oh, okay. Ahmed, and then we go Ahmed, Faramars, Howie, and whoever was on this side. Go ahead.
2 questions. My first question is this first for Amina says so did the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam hate the person who went to sleep before Isha or had conversations after Isha, or did he hate the thing that they did?
Definitely not the person. He said he disliked people talking after Isha. He said that it was taking away from what is healthy and what is a good practice. Good question. And always that is the answer for the Prophet.
My second question is if I'm saying it's like healthy for me, like would it be healthy for like a person or somebody like for them to stay awake after Fajr? Because isn't it like sunnah to stay awake after Fajr?
I'm not completely understanding your question.
Is it if it's sunnah to stay awake after Fajr, and you said to not stay awake after Fajr, so which do you do?
I think I said not stay awake after Fajr.
Do you say like don't stay awake after one of the prayers or something?
After tahajjud. So by definition, tahajjud means that you're praying in the middle of the night. So you go to sleep, you wake up, pray, and then you go back to sleep.
Okay, he's talking about tahajjud. Okay. Not Fajr, yes.
Go back, wake up for Fajr.
Yes. Alhamdulillah.
Yeah, I had a question regarding the protein.
Uh-huh.
For me, it's all steak, and so I don't drink this shake. So how about the cholesterol level?
Well, the interesting thing about cholesterol is that cholesterol is actually not created from the fat that you are eating. It's actually created from excess carbohydrates that's damaging your arteries, and your body actually deposits lipids in order to try to heal it. So the way that they describe this is like blaming animal fat for cholesterol is like blaming the firefighter for the fire. It's literally coming to help to heal your body. Like every time a fire happens, the firefighters show up. It's not it's just they're like, but why is there always fire when you're here? I'm trying to put it out. So there is a really, really great documentary on YouTube, and it is called Fat Fiction. I highly recommend that people watch it.
Also, if someone can find it and put it in the group.
Yes. Fat Fiction is a documentary that talks about how we end up villainizing fat in the United States. And it's a very interesting process of how an unknown doctor that had very little scientific background infiltrated basically the government because he knew people that was there, and then this idea that fat was the villain happened. What actually is the most detrimental to cholesterol is the standard American diet when you add fat and carbohydrates together. So the very interesting thing is that if you look at different diets and the research around different diets and the ones that are considered quote unquote healthy and the ones that are not healthy, there is a consistent pattern for diets that improve health versus diets that don't improve health. And this is looking at, say, the Mediterranean, a ketogenic diet in different nations. Diets that are high carbohydrates and low fat tend to be healthier than diets that are high fat and high carbohydrates, or diets that are high fat and high protein are actually healthier than diets that are high fat and high. When you combine carbohydrates and fat together, that is actually where the damage happens. So this is the reason why you see people who are able to follow the ketogenic for a long time now. I think it's a little extreme, but it works for some people. They have a carnivore diet now, like they like literally are like, vegetables are going to kill you. Not my philosophy, but it's fascinating. But people are able to live this way because it's not the fat by itself. It's actually the combination of having. So a steak and vegetables is good for you. A steak and mashed potatoes is no, right? It's when you add the carbohydrates to the fat is when actually the damage happens.
That one hurt.
Sorry.
Well, I wanted to ask, like, are humans just not built to eat carbs? Or like, what are carbs?
No, I don't. So I don't think that it's that humans were not built to eat carbs. I think that we eat too many. We just eat it's like we just took it to the extreme. I think human beings were meant to eat things in seasons, right? We were not. We are in a very interesting place in human history because there has never been a time in human history where we've had access to so much food. Never, ever in human history. I live in Connecticut in the winter and I can go down the street in the store and get a fresh orange. Why am I eating oranges in the dead of winter in Connecticut that's been flown from Mexico, right? Any other time we would not be able to do that, right? So it's just, it has to do with the way that colonization happened. So when I went to Senegal, a very interesting thing is I have a friend in Senegal, and he was telling me, we were talking about the foods of Senegal, and he was like, rice is a center staple in Senegal. He said, but Senegal is a desert. We don't grow rice here. The reason why rice is a staple of Senegal is because it was colonized by the French, who also colonized Taiwan. And they literally flew it to Senegal. And now it is, and then people are like, but it's my traditional food. Actually, it's not. So even when we think about traditional food, literally go back and see, what was your ancestors eating before colonization happened? That was your traditional food, not what your grandmother was eating. And it really will change the way that we look at nutrition. Like we just weren't, it's not that we weren't, people in different places ate different foods. And we have to really like be conscious of the fact of, we were not meant to eat 3 meals and 2 snacks a day. If you had to farm your own food, that would literally not be sustainable for you. You would not be able to produce that much food to have you eating every 3 to 4 hours. And if you did, you would be working so hard that you would not be overweight in order for you to eat that amount of food.
That's big. I don't know, Danish and Adik, do either of you have a question? Or?
Yeah, I had a question. I mean, speaking of like the harms of colonization, like I think like one aspect of what you were saying is like trying to increase like protein intake as opposed to the other. But like part of the sunnah is sort of reducing meat consumption, eating meat infrequently because, I mean, I mean now we have refrigeration. We're able to sort of hoard meat and like store it. But like before, you had to like meat was like a luxury item because when you slaughter an animal, there's a lot of meat that you have to feed a lot of people, right? So it's for sort of like celebrations, these kinds of things. So how do we sort of think about like trying to increase protein intake while trying to maintain the sunnah of like reducing meat intake?
So here is my opinion on this, is that we have to be very intentional in how we look at the sunnah in terms of what was the habits based on the culture of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and what was actually a sunnah that was recommended, right? The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam did not eat a lot of meat because meat was really expensive. So the equivalent to us today is like me telling you go eat lobster for every single meal. Right? It's very expensive. Most people are not going to do that. So the prophet did not eat a lot of meat because he said meat was bad or because meat was something that, he did not want to consume. He loved lamb shoulder, right? That was one of his favorite meals. So I think that this is one of those things where we have to really look at is I think of it in terms of sort of like the dress of the prophet. He wore thobes, right? There's a sunnah to wear thobes, but it was his culture. Abu Jahl wore thobes too, right? It was the culture of the Arabs. When we look at things like people eating 3 meals a day, Prophet ﷺ did not eat 3 meals a day. Some days he went, and we know this from clear Sahih hadith. When we talk about, the Prophet, he ate dates, the hadith literally said for 3 days, all he had was dates and water. For 3 consecutive days, because that's literally all he had to eat. So are you trying to practice the sunnah the exact way the prophet practiced? Because how many times you did a 3-day date and water fast? I'm just saying. So we have to think about that's number one. Number two, I think that we have to really think about what we need to do to heal our body. When I think of nutrition and I think of how do we get back to the sunnah, the way that we get back to the sunnah and being able to actually do what the prophet did, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is we have to heal our body. 70 to 80% of Americans are metabolically unhealthy. And that doesn't just mean and that is beyond the fact that 74% of Americans are overweight or obese, right? So now this is just a completely different. You can be quote unquote a healthy body weight and still have high blood pressure, still have diabetes. So you still need to heal your body, right? So many of you are young and you're probably not dealing with this, but this is a very big issue. And so I think that we have to balance it in a couple of ways. Number one, and what I was saying to the young lady earlier is that healthy is a really broad term, and what's healthy is different from every single person. So my philosophy is that there's no such thing as a universally healthy food. Tomatoes are absolutely healthy, but if you have acid reflux, tomatoes are horrible for you, right? Milk is absolutely healthy. It's a great all-inclusive it's the perfect ratio. Dairy is the perfect ratio of carbs, proteins, and fats. But if you have lactose intolerance, it is not a healthy food for you. So if you are healing your body, you have to heal yourself. And we'll say this, I'm gonna keep this as a term. Heal yourself back to the sunnah, right? That is really where I'm very adamant for people in terms of, well, the prophet did this. The most beneficial things nutritionally that you can do that the Prophet ﷺ is fast on Mondays and Thursdays. Literally, the most beneficial. But, we want to choose to eat honey and dates and, all of the other things. So when it comes to sort of like, how do you balance between the sunnah of the prophet? First, I believe that you have to look at what he was doing out of circumstance versus what was actually recommended. That's the first thing. The second thing that I would say is that you have to understand where you are health-wise and physically in order for you to heal yourself back to actually being able to practice the sunnah. Some people, they're in a condition where they can't even fast, right? So this is like where you have, so I have one, alhamdulillah, I tell her story often. I have one client, she's 78 years old. She's been in my program for 3 years. She was insulin dependent and medication dependent diabetic for 20 years. 3 years, it took us 3 years for her to heal herself back to her to last Ramadan be able to fast for the first time in 20 years. Right? Her doctor took her off her diabetic medication, right? So we want to heal to get back to be able to actually practice in the sunnah, because 5 years before she met me, there was no fasting. She was a medication dependent diabetic. There's no fasting. for her. So the very sunnah or even the fard, she had to take the alternative. If she insisted to do everything right that she read, she would never gotten to a point where she can actually now fast at least most of the month. So I hope that answers.
Can I just a quick clarification? I don't, at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, they weren't actually wearing thobes in the same way that you see people now. Actually, it was closer to what you would see men wearing in ihram. Like that was their standard clothes, which is why even the sunnah about like no one's like clothes should be dragging. You made clothes like you would need a sheath, you would have to shave the wool off the sheath, like this was, or you would have to pick the cotton, and you didn't pre-slave trade and junk like that. Like people actually had to do it.
Right.
It was very, very expensive. So like even people having a change of clothes, they were wealthy. SubhanAllah. So like it's a shift of how we do things. I think Zadeh, and then I saw Sammy is and Ty, and then can we let her go? Allah, thank you so much. I really appreciate it on behalf of all of us.
So my question is, which is a better combination, a light suhoor and a heavy iftar, or the opposite, a heavy suhoor and a light iftar?
It is really dependent on each individual and what your particular goals are. It really is. Some people, the digestion is not going to allow them to do that. So that's really very. So I wouldn't say either one is better. It's really individual per person.
Sammy and Ty, go.
I was just curious if you drink electrolytes before you start your fast and when you end up working out.
So I do not drink electrolytes before I start my fast. I think electrolytes are overhyped, but that's a whole nother conversation. I think it's more hype than it's not. Most people don't even drink enough water. I think we should start with drinking water. And I do my workout after I break my fast, right? Some days, and it changes. Last year, I realized I was getting older and that before fast was not working. But I do my workouts after I break my fast because I have more energy. So that is individual. So again, if you have enough energy and the time and the ability to work out like an hour before a fast, then you could that was definitely before you break your fast, then that's definitely a good time. If not, then whenever you can break your fast and you can eat protein within an hour after you're done, that's the best time to work out.
Is lactose intolerance reversible? What's your take on lactate?
Is lactose intolerance reversible? Technically, it is. It's sort of like most food allergies now they're saying are reversible. So they're like you give small portions and it can like build up. My take on lactose intolerance is it depends on sort of like the level of lactose intolerance that you have. I am not opposed to lactate if you're like, I really want to drink milk. I would actually recommend that you start to see how you react to raw milk, because oftentimes, particularly in the United States, the issue is our industrial farming industry for animals as opposed to the actual food itself. So I was actually telling Amina this earlier. My daughter, who had been gluten intolerant since she was probably like 13, when she was 23, we went to Senegal and she could eat bread fine. We go to Turkey and the bread has no problem. She has no problem. Come back to the United States, the bread completely messes up her digestive system. So I think that it has a lot to do with just literally the United States food system. So that is and technically it can be sort of like, and you can become more lactose tolerant, but it is very individual. I would say if you wanted to try to do something, it's literally called small dosing, and then you sort of like build up the enzyme in your stomach in order to break down the dairy.
Thank you so much. Alhamdulillah. I know we ran late, but thank you everyone for being here. Thank you so much for doing that. I apologize for the rain. Normally we have better weather. If you ever want to move here, There is a community of people that
I
are
well, you
welcome
know,
to be part of
let
it.
me tell you, I'm gonna have to say you're gonna have to compensate me by bringing me back in like when it's nice weather.
I'm so down for this. Barakallah fik. Can we close with a dua?
You do it today.
Bismillah. سبحانك الله وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم العصر إن إنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات تواصوا بالحق تواصوا بالصبر. By the token of time, surely humankind is in a state of loss, except for those who believe and do good works and counsel each other with truth and counsel each other with patience. Ya Allah, grant us your love, the love of those that you love, and the love of everything that brings us closer to your love. Make your love more beloved to us than ourselves, our families, and cold water. Ya Allah, allow us to heal our bodies, our minds, and our spirits. Ya Allah, heal us in every single way. Ya Allah, allow us to witness this Ramadan. Make it our best Ramadan yet. Make it a place of spiritual, physical, and mental openings for all of us. And for everyone around the Ummah, Ya Allah, give those who are struggling, make this Ramadan an opening for all of them, Ya Allah. Allow us all to heal, allow us to live lives the Prophet ﷺ would be proud of according to his Sunnah ﷺ. Allow us to be with him in the highest levels of Jannah and let him be proud of us when he meets us ﷺ. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala sahbihi wa sallam, and prayers and blessings be on his beloved Prophet and his family, his companions. And may Allah reward our teacher, Ustaz Mubarakah.
Alhamdulillah. Thank you for coming.